Hello? Preachers on Monday nights? I can do that. It's the season 2 premiere of Preacher. Double episode review. On the Road and Mumbai Sky Tower. Come on! Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to our review of Preacher, because you guys asked! And of course, it's an incredibly awesome show. I am really excited to get to dive in and do reviews of Preacher for this season. So of course, as usual, there are spoilers ahead. Again, it's an amazing show. Really just a wonderfully well-crafted show. Our first season really sort of setting up our initial storyline. We got the character introduction, we got the voice introed, and then of course the real setup for this season, the discovery that God is missing, and then the eventual resultant destruction of the town after that, because you can't really have a town full of people that know God is missing and running around in despair. And they did a great job. I loved how they sort of kept that in the background, away from the characters, from Jesse's and Tulip and Cassidy's kind of awareness. For at least the whole first episode, just things happening in the background. Kind of fun as they just get to dive into what's going on with this season. Now, I want to sort of step back and just talk about the structure of the show, which is just so incredibly well done. There are really three main things that just are such a draw to this. One, of course, is the storytelling. Really amazingly well-written scripts. There's not really plot holes. Everything leads from one thing to another, and they set a great tone in the show. You know, it's in some ways very realistic. It's like our world, but just a little bit to the side, just that little bit of twist with the unusual characters, because of course we have angels coming down and the demons and the conflicts and the technology there. It just adds a wonderful surreality to the show, but they don't stick with that. They have those moments of weirdness, and then they have, of course, the great comedy and interaction between the characters. But they'll take that and move from there to moments of real seriousness and real introspection. The whole arc that we had the first season, when Jesse really discovered the voice within him, discovered that he had Genesis, and his whole initial arc of being tempted to overly use and to kind of push everyone else to the side, and then seeing the resultant cost of that, mainly in the loss of Eugene, well, sending him down to hell, the realization of that he can't do this. Even Cassidy, who is really such a flippant character for the most part, which is why we love him, he is able to stick up when he steps in and basically sets himself on fire to get Jesse, to sort of set that realization with Jesse to test him. I know you're a good person, you're not going to let me burn. These are incredible arcs within such a comedic light structure, so I really love the depth that they do in this show. From a camera point, amazing visuals. The use of color and framing is just beautifully well done. There are so many shots throughout the show that are framed as you really should, like pictures, like moving pictures. I remember the first shots when we first met the cowboy and his story, and we had that one move of him from one side of the screen to the other on the horse, just with the big sun right there. Just moments constantly like that where you could freeze frames almost anywhere throughout the episode and have a beautifully framed picture. It is amazing. And of course, then their use of color really amplifies all of that. And of course, the big topper is the character interaction. Jesse, Tulip, Cassidy, the three of them together. I mean, all of the characters are really well, but especially this core that we have they're funny, they do great banter, they're very comfortable with each other back and forth, and all these conversations are very realistic. We can see these moments happening within these characters. And of course, I'm mentioning all of this because it all comes up beautifully in that opening sequence when we have them riding in the car, and again, those perfectly framed shots of the three of them, the comedy banter back and forth, talking about foreskins and what happens with them. And then we have the classic music song that comes up that everybody wants to sing, but nobody wants to admit it. And we get the car chase, we get all of the comedy that's associated with this. And it blends, and it's done. If you notice, they had shifted into this very grainy 70s film feel throughout all of that chase. They bursted up the brightness and the contrast. You got all of those framed, film quality shots. It was beautifully well done, really added a nice tone and feel to it. And then we get the comedy of dealing with the voice and all of those cops. And then once we have that, we shift immediately into the intense, very grisly action when the Saints of Killers shows up, the cowboy shows up just burns through everything. So we have that moment of levity immediately thrown into one of fear, terror, panic. And it all stays very consistent within the show. So it was a beautifully opening sequence, and I think it really frames perfectly all of those elements that makes this show so good. But the quest for God must continue, so our first stop is Uncle Mike. Of course, Uncle Mike, he knows all of these things, and those were great. Again, great moments. Very, normal stuff, but twisted. We have Ashley in the cage. And when we first see her, we're thinking, oh my God, Mike is going to be some sort of, killer, psychopath, kidnapper. But no, it's just how he does his ministry, how he helps people deal with addictions. I love it, drugs, sex, Twitter. That was awesome. And I love how it continues on. We're still not sure until she starts shouting out in the next scene that police just let her post something to Instagram. It was just, again, a wonderful moment of dealing with modern technology and its honest addictive capacities. But as for Uncle Mike, he is quite an unflappable figure. Nothing really seems to throw him off. When he's told about God is missing, he doesn't really seem to react too strong. Oh, that makes sense. I've been praying and I haven't heard back from... Oh, of course, God is missing. It was a beautiful scene. Yeah, we got to see the introduction. We got from there they face off to head off to She's to go see Tammy. But it was fun just seeing that, because not only does he not really react to that, and then the great moments of talking and seeing the voice and even his reaction with that, very calm, very understanding. And then when the Saints of Killers shows up, when the cowboy shows up, again, it's like he's expecting. He just sits down, he pours a couple of whiskeys right there, and it's just, yeah, okay, that's fine. I love that he did have a plan, though, was to take himself out and not to try and attack the Saint of Killers. Again, it was just smart, but again, very unflappable. It's like nothing was throwing him off of his character. It was just, they were really fun moments. And the Saint of Killers, of course, very tough, very scary, very imposing figure. And I was kind of on the fence. How is this guy going to play himself off? No, don't like him. Don't like him. I mean, I love him as a character. But as someone I'd want to run into, no, definitely not. He has no problem killing everybody that he runs into. Why would you want to leave a trail of that angels are coming through, of course? And it's always interesting because the voice draws him. It's like he goes and then ends up killing everybody that was exposed to the voice. So it still sort of keeps that secret. I found that kind of really interesting. Everybody that hears the voice ends up getting killed. But, then everybody with the shots or the pulling out of the tongue as just, anyway, nasty, nasty killer from hell. Definitely the guy you gotta run from. And of course, our team ends up running to Tammy's, to Shishi's, to track down God, who we find out is a lover of jazz. And I love how that, again, carries on into the next episode when we find out why, as a lover of jazz, that's only going to complicate Tulip's life more. But here we also have great moments of dealing with, again, Cassidy is... he just causes trouble wherever he goes. And even a chance to try and hang out in a strip club, ends up getting security called in and the owner getting shot before she can, well, not really before she can really reveal the information. She does tell him about the jazz. She does tell him to you know, which direction to go in that sense. But it deals with all of those coincidences, and that's one thing in the way that they shape this world that actually does work. Now, coincidences as a storytelling standpoint are really tough to sell. It looks very Deus ex machina, you know, very much of a God's hand type kind of thing. But in a show like Preacher, that totally works. It's one of those things where we find out any moment of coincidence works because we feel like this is a show where the hand of God, where that type of fate starts to play in. Not only when we run into Tammy here and we find out about jazz, and we have, of course, Cassidy's troublemaking, end up getting her shot. Those coincidences. Even when we find out later on, when we get into the next episode, when we get into Mumbai Sky Tower, that final conversation that Jesse has with the lounge singer, again continuing that whole jazz thing. Of course, he would talk about jazz and remind him, you got to listen to the music, you got to pay attention to the music. We would expect this type of coincidental interaction to happen in a world like this, whereas in many other shows, such script telling often seems lazy. It doesn't seem like a natural way to get there. So one thing that ends up working really, really well in this show. Now, Mumbai Sky Tower, episode 2, just, you know, it was full of awesome moments. I mean, we have the end of On the Road when we finally have the first interaction there between Jesse and Saint of Killers, and we find out that the voice doesn't work. That adds some fun complications into things, of course, because you can't have a good antagonist that can easily be dispatched by the protagonist. There's no conflict there. We don't like that. But there are like I said, there are so many great moments. The fact that they're staying in a hotel that has a gun enthusiast convention right now. So when it comes out, we have the moment of everybody running out, not with a gun and a bat, not just a crowd going to check things out, but everyone heavily armed with automatic weapons. How they got that in the States, I'm not sure, but it is still Texas, right? And a grenade launcher of all things. But it was perfect. And again, you had this great comic moment of everyone coming out and shooting, and yay, the explosions, and then boom, horribleness, more death thrown out, which leads us to a lot of the conflicts that Jesse's going to be carrying again throughout at least these first couple episodes and probably far into the season, is all of the deaths that are end up caused. When he uses the voice, it now has a very serious effect. It summons Saint, who kills everybody who hears it. But there's also all these people that just die because of the interaction, because that it's there. So we know that Jesse is going to be carrying a certain level of this guilt constantly with him. And of course, at this point, they do finally find out that Annville got destroyed, that the town was wrecked, which again was another great dichotomous moment. Is we have the joy of the gunfight, and then we have the horror of everybody getting killed and run away, and then that deep realization where we have all three of the characters there staring at that TV, just realizing, oh my God, what has happened behind us? So a lot of depth, a lot of things going on in that first scene. And then, of course, we had all those moments with Fiore. It was just, oh, it was kind of heartbreaking. I mean, the first shots that they had there when they did it a couple of days ago, the passage of time I thought was beautifully done because you almost don't notice that he's just sitting there. But they have the clouds above, just in that small section, speed up to show the passage of time and then stop as the truck comes up, and then that leaves, and then they speed up again to show the passage of time. Just a nice, quick little thing to tell that story, and does it well without throwing it in your face, and not as obvious as just a clock face moving or the shadows or anything like that. It is just the clouds. I thought that was very cool. And then we have his whole suicide sequence. When he's down in the tubs, he misses his buddy. You know, we never really saw what happened to him. But Saint of Killers is not, everybody he meets seems to kill. So I am wondering if by getting hired, part of the price was he got to kill Descartes there. So I don't know. He doesn't say, Fiore doesn't really get into that. Hopefully that's something that we find out later on. But obviously he's feeling it, and that whole sequence of him going and killing himself over and over again, and then how that leads to him getting a show as a magician in a very prestige kind of way was just again wonderfully done, and all of those moments. And then later on when we have that final bonding between Cassidy and Fiore, I think was my favorite bit of the whole episode, of the playfulness and the goofing off and the kind of drug conversations and just kind of like buddy realization of just hanging out. There was such a moment, that last bit, when the joke of circumcision, which I loved, comes back around into why maybe that explains the creaminess of the ice cream. Was perfect. It was great to bring the joke around there, and it was great to have Fiore there sitting there having another bonding moment, like, oh my god, there is so much more that could potentially come out of being down here. But there's also that sad side to it too, is because we know that Cassidy's going to have to leave. Is this something that would last? We ask as it's going on, not before we get to the end there. You know, is that something that's going to last, or is it just... I was wondering if that might inspire him to try and go back down to hell. Is that where, you know, my thought was wondering where his guy was, but when they made the discussion of what happens when angels die, that was the bigger question. That was a nice kind of little drop there, because of course what eventually happens up where Preacher makes the big mistake, and that's always it. Whenever he uses the voice, it never works out well, and this is that continuing bit. When he told Fiore as they parted to find peace, I knew immediately that was not going to go well. Jesse doesn't have that kind of good luck at the moment, but it's also, what is it that's going to find peace? He hates being there. He just wants to be gone. Does he want to join up with his buddy? Does he just want to get off of Earth because he can't go home without Genesis? But we do find through that, of course, officially, that even angels, if shot by a gun, are dead, or shot by saints' guns, is dead. So there is a little bit of realization that comes with that, makes him an even more dangerous figure. But where are we going next? Of course we're going to head down to Louisiana. And why is that such complication? Well, there's Gary. Well, Gary's boss, Victor, has a bit of a past there with Tulip, we find out. Nice little moment there between Gary and Tulip. I love the fight scene. I love how Tulip is obviously overpowered as a small person against a larger person from a straight strength perspective, but the moment that she gets loose, she turns around and just whoops him. I don't think Gary made it after all that. The blood out of the face seems to imply things went really bad for Gary. Maybe not. We'll have to see if he does recover from that. But I love Tulip. It was just a great fight sequence, and I love the whole idea of having Tulip, the girl, as the heavy in this. We have, you know, Jesse is, you know, he has the voice. He's the sort of main protagonist. We have Cassidy, who is the troublemaker, and then we have Tulip, the smallest of the three of them, who whips the most ass. I love that from her. It just adds an extra joy into every scene there. But, of course, that whole scene gives us our introduction that there is Victor. Victor is in Louisiana. Victor and Tulip have a history, and they're going to have to encounter that, because if you're going to follow the music, and God is a fan of jazz, there is only one place that you can go, and that is New Orleans. And that appears to be where we're going to be heading next. Alright, just a couple of small things to touch on here. One, of course, Cassidy knows the best way to get the taste of blood out of your mouth. Of course. And everyone knows it's hot sauce and yoo-hoo, right? It's common knowledge. Tulip and Jesse have a very violent relationship. I mean, you know, it's close, it's cuddly, but violent. I mean, their foreplay involving breaking in through doors, just a sign of them. However, they definitely are making up for lost time, and it's nice to see the two of them together. Of course, the marriage thing wasn't going to work out. It's too early for all that to come out as a clean escape. But I love that they're sort of, you know, again, they're moving their relationship forward. Cassidy had a very specific timetable for converting Fiore. 2 hours and 45 minutes. I mean, yes, he knows his drugs, he knows how things interact, but seriously, very, very specific, and I think he was pretty much right on time there. All right, the guy that was looking for quarters at the vending machine at the beginning of Mumbai Sky Tower, didn't he realize his arm was gone? I mean, I understand shock, but that seemed to last a lot more. I mean, look, it was funny, it was comic, it was great, but seriously, man, go up a wound like that, you'd be bleeding out, like, fast. Oh, and of course, with the Gary incident, we now have Cassidy having a second secret that he has to keep from Jesse. I'm not sure how much longer that's going to be able to last, but it does keep putting him in a very uncomfortable position. It's like a powder keg that's going to wait to go off. He's going to get too many secrets, and then one day on a drug binge, he's just going to explode all of them all over Jesse, and, well, that'll be gross and complicated. All right, so I think that's going to wrap things up for us for this week. Very sad about Fiore. I hope that he comes back in some way. Maybe we do get to find out sort of what happens when angels die. Is there a chance for him to come back? Also, we really do got to find out about Eugene. Really missing him. But next week, for sure, we're going to be heading down to New Orleans. We are going to meet Victor and find out whatever the backstory between him and Tulip are. It, of course, is going to complicate our heroes' lives considerably, I'm sure. So if you did enjoy this review, please go ahead and hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, comments, you know where to put them. Section below. I love our conversations. Please, let's keep it going. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Darren Jakes. And please, if you're not a subscriber, join us. Be a subscriber. Don't miss anything. We're doing Preacher here. We're still doing Fear the Walking Dead. We've got Game of Thrones coming up next month. And, of course, Inhumans premiering in September. So, if you're not a subscriber, you can become one by hitting my face right there. And you won't miss anything. And speaking of Inhumans, I will throw up my review of the Inhumans trailer right there. And you can check that out. So, I am D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.